everybody, Ty here. I hope everybody's doing well. As I mentioned in the stream last night, we're going to be getting a little bit of a break from winter weather. And also, since we're getting pretty far into February now, we're going to be taking a look at what's ahead for next month here. So, without further ado, we're going to get into the March outlooks here. Well, this will be the first of two, truthfully, though. The second one is going to be coming in right at the very end of the month. So that video might be out on the 28th or the 1st of March. But anyways, make sure you're hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button. But here we go here. As you can see that we're going to be back in a predominant warm pattern once again. A big part of that is going to be the shift that we're going to be experiencing. We're slowly but surely transitioning from a weak La Nina into a neutral Enzo. This is still going to be a weak La Nina month, but as we go further along here, the conditions are going to start to change. We're going to see whether it's a little bit closer to average. This will have an interesting impact on potentially our severe weather season. I do think that March could be a more active month as a result of the warming temperatures that we have here. Still going to be some cold air off to the west. It's going to be predominantly cold, mostly over towards the northwest and over towards southern parts of Alaska. So there's still going to be indicators of some cold air moving in and throughout the month. But the question is going to be, how will this time be timed with other factors such as troughs, ridges, etc., that will give us chances at maybe more severe weather. I also don't think we're fully done with winter storms either. We do need to be paying very close attention to that as well. So let's go ahead and also take a look at the precip outlook here. A couple other things I've made note of here. In regards to severe weather, this zone being below average is always a point of interest because any of my weather nerds, if you know what the EML is, the elevated mix layer, whenever there's usually drought over this area, it's usually an eye-opener. It could be a couple of bigger events further off towards the east here. So with moisture becoming usually more available during this time of year and beyond, we will have to keep an eye out for severe weather potential there. The jet stream still looks like for right now the pattern is going to be mostly active towards the north, but I've been noticing over the last few outlooks here, especially leading into February and now March, that this above average precip area has slowly been extending off to the south here. We're now starting to get into the deep south and the mid south at this point. So like I said, I do think that battle zone is going to begin to shift a bit here. I think March and April in particular might be the most active months. Could be questionable in regards to activity as we go further down the line here. Of course, over towards the northwest is going to still be a point of contention in regards to weather. So I expect plenty of activity there. Not quite as strong of a signal in regards to precipitation in Alaska, especially towards the southern states. It's about an equal chance of being above or below average. So I would expect us to be relatively close to normal, but I think we could go either way depending on how the jet stream kind of pans out at this point here. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at our model data here. We're going to be looking towards the North Pole here to look at our two oscillations here. Right here in the center is the Arctic oscillation. Over here towards Greenland is the other area I'm looking for. This is the North Atlantic oscillation. And it's pretty interesting to see what transpires here, especially as we go throughout these first couple of weeks of March here. We actually end up in a pretty cold pattern to end out that first week here. You can actually see a very prominent warm air mass hanging around the Atlantic here. And as a result, we get some cold air kind of forced out of the NAO region here. So the eastern half of the U.S. is going to see some more cold weather in the days ahead here. This will be to close out that first week of March. And then eventually, we start to see the AO begin to go negative here. And as a result, just about the entire northern half of the lower 48 here has a chance at some below average temperatures. These don't seem like they're going to be very long lasting, because if we go to the next frame here, just make sure I'm showing the date. This is the 13th that we're looking at now. We go to the next one. Warm air is right back by the time we get into the middle and latter part of the month here. But another thing that I'm making note of once again, as I mentioned before, warm off to the southern states and out to the east. cold air masses off to the northwest and western half of the U.S. These are not going to be static. These are going to be moving pretty much the entire time. We're just looking at it from a week to week standpoint. So at some point, these two air masses are going to interact with each other, and that's going to be our battle zone. Like I said, timing is going to be the key to everything, but this does kind of remind me of some old severe weather setups, especially back in the early to mid 2000s. We usually will see carbon copies of that down the line, usually through severe weather season. So this isn't surprising, but this definitely has that look that I would be keeping an eye out for, especially if you're someone that's a little bit more adept when it comes to the weather. We end up seeing a very similar look as we get towards the 27th as well, and then even as we close out the month and head in April, we have another look that's almost exactly identical. So it could be a conducive weather pattern. We'll have to see how things pan out. As we get closer and closer towards the beginning of March, we'll be able to look at this day to day. But model data at this point is still relatively limited. So while I have my speculations and my suspicions, just kind of look at it as hearsay. Take it with a grain of salt as of right now. Nothing's really guaranteed at this point. It's almost impossible to guarantee it. But with the way things stand right now, this is going to affect our temperature significantly. As you can see right now, we're still gonna have pretty cold air to end out the month of February here. You can see over towards the deep south is where we're gonna have the greatest focus of below average temperatures here. Some places even getting to about 20 to 30 degrees below average. And then by the time we get into the following week here, we start to see more cold air lingering around the eastern half of the U.S., but out towards the west, we have a classic setup of a positive PNA. Look at how significantly above average we are in some of these places here. We could easily be 20 to 30 degrees above average, even in places like North Dakota and Montana, it's very unseasonable. It's unseasonably warm by this point. You could even see 60-degree temperatures. And to think that today we're seeing temperatures that are about maybe 20, 30, even potentially 35 below zero, not below average, below zero, and then making this sudden jump here within the course of a week, it's a pretty big extreme here. So again, as I've mentioned before, whenever we have these big temperature extremes, just make sure you're checking your immunity, make sure that you have what you need in case you do end up getting sick, because this is the kind of weather that will do it to you. In any case, though, as I mentioned before, towards the 13th, another cold blast expected. Just how significant is still questionable at this point, but it's a pretty solid look that I'm seeing right here. Relatively concrete signal, but like I said, I'm not gonna guarantee it just yet. And I'm even hard pressed to call it a signal at this point, because like I said, at this juncture, model data is still relatively limited. Looking 3 weeks out is kind of shooting blindly into the wind, so to speak. But like I said before, one signal that I'm a little bit more confident in particular is this signal right here, where we start to warm up as we get towards the mid to later part of the month here. You can see well above average temperatures. Pattern is essentially flipped at this point. We went from a positive PNA where it's warm out west and cool to the east to a negative PNA, which is the exact opposite. Cool out to the west, warm, hot out towards the east. And that is more than likely how we're going to end out the month of March, and even potentially start out the month of April. Now, in regards to the precipitation here, as I said before, right, the close out the month, we're going to be relatively quiet over the lower 48, so don't be alarmed by these below average precipitation rates here. These first couple weeks are going to be rather quiet. As we go further along, though, here's that signal. Here's the reason why I'm thinking that severe weather might be going up, is seeing this little trend that I've been seeing pop up here on the screen, especially towards the deep south. Do think the jet stream may dip just far enough to where we get the deep south and southeast into a rainy pattern here as we get towards the early to mid part of the month here. Also, the same reason why you see these above average signals over here towards the northwest. That signal I'm much more confident in than this right now, but I have a fair amount of confidence, I should say. As we go further along here, you can see that above average precip, shifts back to the north. I do think that eventually we'll see the jet stream start to retreat a little bit. Just based off of what we're seeing on this map here, you can almost kind of see where the ridge is going to be and where the troughs are going to be in most cases. So predominantly, I would think that our storm pattern is going to be a little something like this. Right up here where you see this little bump here, that's going to be our ridge, and this is where all our dry air is going to be. And then this could be a bit variable here, but this is where we kind of level out said trough. Anywhere to the south of that trough, you'll still end up being dry here, but anywhere under this ridge, this little hump that you see right here in the wavelength, gonna be dry. But in any case though, this does look like it's going to be the predominant pattern to end out the month and maybe even start parts of April off here as well. Like I said, we'll gain a little bit more clarity as we go forward as to what happens towards the middle to later part of the month. As far as the GFS is concerned, we can only see up to about maybe the 7th, 8th, closing in towards maybe a little bit further along than that. I have to check again, because we can look about 16 days in advance. So we're going to get closer actually towards, like, I actually would say closer towards the 9th and 10th. So we'll be going over that pretty soon. And then also we have the spring outlook ahead. So make sure you're staying tuned for that. Make sure you get that notification bell on. Also hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Feel free to leave a comment. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time.